So, you ready for the finale? You ready for our final episode?
What the fuck are you talking about?
It's our final episode, Vespa. Our final episode that we've recorded before we started publishing these.
Oh, okay. I was
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
God damn it.
Welcome to this. Welcome to the Title Pendering podcast, the Sonic comic recap podcast where, while we're not as intellectual a podcast as Homestuck made this world, our recaps are going to get just as long.
Oh, no.
I'm disappointed, and I'm joined here by my lovely partner, Knuckles Good.
That's about right, yeah.
Today we're going to be covering a lot. We've already figured that we're going to be splitting these into batches again. Unless this goes on way too long, but at this point, we're probably just going to accept these episodes are going to get longer and longer. We're probably going to do issues 25 through 33 and all the specials in between that. How you feeling right now? Just general thoughts. No need to get too deep into the weeds of opinions.
I won't go into too much detail into it, but this has been an interesting batch, for better or worse. Some good highs and terrible lows. We'll say that when we get to it.
Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna put it at the top. I feel like this is where where the comic is starting to just spin its wheels a bit.
Kinda.
But let's just jump right into that. No more stalling, as I said before we started recording. Recap zone. Issue 25, Go Ahead, Mecha My Day. Sonic's shoes are being fit with a Sonic cam in order to keep a watch on Sonic when he's on his solo adventures. Sally made this modification because a new zone portal, the same type of action zones found in all Sonic games, has opened up, revealed it by a cutaway to Robotnik to be Collision Chaos as featured in Sonic CD because this is of course a video game adaptation. Robotnik plans on sending one of his robots to kidnap Amy Rose, a fan of Sonic himself, who frequently writes into the Sonicgrams, as revealed by Robotnik holding a massive bag of letters to Archie headquarters that he stole, to motivate Sonic not just by his ego towards a new zone challenging Robotnik and all that, but also trying to free the girl, as it were. He sends a mysterious robot to kidnap her before taunting Sonic to try and challenge this mysterious new zone. Tails is sent to recon the area, and immediately gets apprehended by SWAT bots. It's within the same page. It's kind of... Sonic makes his way to Collision Chaos Zone, immediately getting chased down by Snively, dressed as Robotnik, as part of a decoy plan that honestly doesn't really amount to much, into Stardust Speedway Zone, where he's challenged to a race by none other than Metal Sonic, whom the comic erroneously refers to as Mecha Sonic. We'll be referring to him as Metal Sonic for purposes of clarity. Lord knows, there's a lot of confusion over which robot doppelganger of Sonic is which.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, at the finish line for the race, the actual Robotnik reveals his plan. The finish line itself is actually a crusher, meaning that even if Sonic wins the race against Metal, he'll still be smushed and ultimately defeated. The race between Metal and Sonic continues as Rotor and Sally fly into the zone to provide backup. Sonic gains the upper hand on Metal using his new move, the Figure 8 Super Peel Out, forcing Metal to push past his own limits to keep up, destroying himself in the process. Sally does a foot dive on Robotnik to prevent him from activating the Crusher as Sonic passes by the finish line, and Sonic tricks Robotnik into standing under it in a slapstick moment, ending the comic with a splash page celebrating 25 issues.
This
comic sucks! I'm just gonna say it. I was really disappointed in it, honestly. Like, full Link horror moment. This comic sucks. Like, Metal Sonic is one of my favorite characters in all of the Sonic canon. I like his design a lot. I like how versatile he is as a character, because you could write him many different ways. But man, he is unbelievably uninteresting in this story.
I mean, I kind of just chalked it up to the fact that this is the first appearance of Metal Sonic, and like and much as I love the guy and much as I love his design, there wasn't much to go off of, and I'm assuming Sega probably just wanted this, like, right, either Sega or the writer themselves just wanted it to be like kind of a straightforward adaptation of CD. So we get pretty much a very bare bones version of Metal and Amy, of basically what the writer just assumed they would be like, and what little appearances they have in CD itself. But I don't entirely disagree that this issue is kind of bad. I think it's a shame, too, because it's not only a CD adaptation in Metal and Amy's first appearance, but Spaziante does the art as well.
This art gets just absolutely squandered, because these are some of the worst page layouts I've ever seen in my life, honestly. It is almost incomprehensible at points with how everything is just cramped together. There's no clear gutter for most of it, and it is just really hard to read, honestly.
I think the problem is, like, given this is Gallagher writing for it, it's a much more gag-heavy story than his first two stories that he did earlier in the last batch, the Eve story and the follow-up to that, given... Like, it's very clear the difference between this and how Penders writes. With Gallagher, there's a lot more just, like, esoteric and, like, wacky gags happening. Like, the whole Sonic Rams thing. Like, the first few pages are just full of gags that just kind of threw me off, because I just wasn't used to... I forgot about Gallagher's writing when I was reading through it. And Spaziante's art, much as I love what he does for Sonic, it can get way too detailed and way too, like, messy. I mean, the layouts certainly don't help, but, like, it's just how detailed and everyone looks, and how the backgrounds look as well, just makes it a mess to look at.
Yeah, I think Spaziante is probably the best artist here, but when his art misses... it misses hard. Like, sometimes characters are just put in a weird perspective. Like, in a later story, one of the characters looks like their neck just snapped off, and I don't know how to describe this in a way that, like, fits for, like, an audio podcast, but he has a specific way of drawing mouths sometimes that just looks really creepy. It's sort of like a weird, like, bell curve sort of thing, almost. Or, I guess, Sweet Bro and Hella Jeff face.
You're not wrong.
It just looks really creepy sometimes.
Yeah.
And another thing that confused me about some of the writing, like, other than just... it's just much more quippy and weirdly written in ways that just don't flow well. At one point, there's a moment when Robotnik is revealing his plan to Sonic and the rest of the Freedom Fighters, and an exchange happens that just really confused me and made me linger on it for more than I needed to. Robotnik is talking about challenging Sonic to visit Collision Chaos Zone, and Sally says, "No, it's a trap, why would you go there?" To which Robotnik says, "Why, Princess Sally? Isn't this a face you can trust? Have I ever lied to you?" And Sally responds with, "No and yes, disrespectively." And I'm like, did you just say that Robotnik has never lied to you and you can trust him?
Wait,
like,
yeah, what?
I'm pretty sure she meant disrespectfully, but the fact that she says disrespectively just completely confused me and had me just stuck for a moment trying to parse it.
I don't think I hate it as much as you do, but, like, I definitely won't disagree that it's a very messy story, and it is kind of disappointing. Just, like, the whole Sonic CD stuff is just unsurprisingly limited to just the Starlight Stardust or Starlight? It's Stardust.
Stardust.
Stardust Speedway Chase, like probably the most iconic part of CD, besides like the Majin Sonic, but that's besides the point. But like and the race itself is probably like the best part of the comic. Like it's where Spaziante's art gets to shine some. And we usually get like a cool like 2-page spread of Sonic and Metal Sonic fighting and racing along the speedway. We also, neat little details like seen in the background, some like stuff advertising for the Sega Saturn. Like there's a billboard with the Saturn logo and Virtua Fighter main guy Akira, I think. I forget his fucking name. I don't play Virtua Fighter.
I was going to call him Virtua Fighter guy if you didn't mention it myself. Don't worry about it.
I have a very vague level of knowledge of Virtua Fighter. It also, something that I wanted to bring up, the zones. What the fuck is the zones? This threw me off.
A brief aside before we get into that, because we're going to get into that. The weird thing about the Stardust Speedway section, that you noticed that there was like an advertisement for the Sega Saturn. Did you notice that there's the giant building in the shape of the Japanese design of Robotnik?
Yeah, it's on the cover as well. I thought that was a weird detail that they kept in.
It's so out of place.
Yeah, it's jarring.
But yeah, zones. So for some reason, in this canon of Sonic, the zones that Sonic goes through aren't just places in the world, they're just alternate dimensions, as it were. I do not understand why they made that delineation at all.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I'm trying to remember how the zones work. Like, we got zones from the games represented in, like, previous issues. Like, in the first Knuckles story, we saw a fucking, Angel Island Zone and Hydrocity in the, like, first half of that story. Like, and it's not really treated as, like, oh, it's a zone. It's
just an island, yeah.
Yeah, it's just part of the world. Like, we have Casinopolis just be, like, a casino that Robotnik makes. Like, this whole it's just a weird bit. Like, I'm sure, like, we see the zone things come up more in at least this batch of the comic. So I'm assuming they're going to be a reoccurring thing. It'll probably be built up more. But, like, in these first few appearances, it just feels like a very clunky way to try and advertise the games again.
Yeah, I honestly hated it. I really hated it.
I just didn't get it.
There's some odds and ends that I also enjoyed. Like the bit where Tails is like, oh, I'm gonna do a swoop down low to avoid being seen as he's scoping Robotnik, and then the literal next panel he's caught. I thought that was pretty funny. The bit where Robotnik is announcing how both Tails and Amy are held hostage, and Crabmeat has a teleprompter. Basically, Crabmeat's acting a teleprompter, having cue cards.
Yeah, every so often, Gallagher does have a gag that does crack me up a little, at least. Also, like, a weird little detail that I noticed. Amy's outfit in this looks a little bit different from how she usually looks in the...
yeah, it looks like she's wearing a tank top and then has, like, weird shoulder poops.
Yeah, like, it's... Her classic Amy's design has, like, it clearly just looks like it's one thing, like just a shirt with poofy shoulders. But it's like a white shirt with green shoulders. Like, it's a small detail, like, it's very insignificant, but it's just, like, a little off to me. Just not what I'm used to, I suppose. Mm-hmm.
Also, brief more aside of how I think Spaziante's art is hit and miss. I don't like how Metal looks. Like, I'm not particularly picky on how to draw him, but there's just some pages, especially like the beginning of part 4, where it just kind of looks rushed. Like, the perspective just feels a bit off.
I get what you mean.
And I was really disappointed by that. We did get the fan art section replaced with Pero art, which you might not have seen because your scans you've been reading have been from the archives, and so you're missing some parts. But
for the most part, I do have, like, I was flipping between, like, Sonic archives and, like, the original scans of the comic, so I did see some of the, like, fan art and news sections.
Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about this is because it's the 25 issue, they decided to, instead of having fan art, have art from the various people working on the comic.
Yeah, I did see that part. That was pretty...
Some of it is absolutely nightmarish. Like...
Yeah. Agreed.
Like, Desasare's art of Sonic looking like a Garfield cartoon where he's washing his feet as well.
Yeah.
Gagliardo's art where Sonic looks like he's from a shoe commercial in a very 90s
okay, I forgot
white merchandising trying to be, quote, gangsta style.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to describe it. I feel like it's a weird-looking Sonic design.
I did like how the duo of Kontarovic and Penders basically just traced key art.
Yeah, it does. It just looks a little awkward. It did look like it was like from like... I didn't realize that was Penders that worked on it as well. I just said like Kontarovic that drew it.
Well, no, because one of them is a drawing by Kontarovic of Robotnik, right. And then on the next page is a drawing by Penders of Sally.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely traced over.
It's
There's also Freddie Mendez's weird, like, 90s anti-hero Sonic.
Yeah. We also get, and we're not going to cover it in too much detail, unfortunately, but we do get where the off-panel, like, gag strips at the Sonicgrams is in, like, actual full force. It's actually just, like, a little bit of slapstick comics of the editors and staff at Archie, and that's pretty cute.
Any interesting Sonicgrams from this batch?
I'm
from this issue.
There are no Sonicgrams for this issue because it's just announcement for staff changes as well as, like, new issues coming out. And I'm gonna say it outright, there's not really that much interesting in Sonicgrams anymore. It's mainly just people asking questions. One thing I did notice, though, is that because they're talking about the various people working on a comic, they did describe Spaziante as the resident video game expert and unending source of Sonic info, who was also credited as having the idea behind a story. And so I am just becoming intimately more aware of, if Spaziante wasn't hired, there's a very real chance that Archie would have had very little to do with the games.
Well, less than it does that already has so far, but yeah. I do remember seeing that as well. It is interesting to know. I'm just kind of wondering now just how wild things would have gone if that was the case. Like, we already see, like, things get kind of weird in this batch, but just imagine if they knew even less about the games, especially with just how little Sega sometimes gives them.
Yeah.
Christ.
I feel like we would have gotten in a Sonic Archie universe that would have somehow been even more insane.
Definitely.
But then we move on to the first of a million billion special issues, that being Sonic and Knuckles Special Issue 1. 3 stories here, one of which we're going to be skipping because we're going to be skipping a bunch of stories until the next episode, and it's gonna make sense when we get there. But for now, we move into Panic in the Sky. Angel Island, still being referred to at this point and for the foreseeable future as just the floating island, is moving to Knothole Village, much to the Freedom Fighters' surprise. More so for everyone other than Sonic and Tails, because apparently they never actually described what happened before in this Island Hedgehog to the others. It's more for comic recap's sake, but it's an interesting, confusing little bit there. Sonic, Tails, and Antoine fly over to the island only to be quickly accosted by what appears to be new heavy artillery attacking them. And so Sonic and Tails parachute drop into Angel Island, and because this is a faithful adaptation of Sonic and Knuckles, they deal with evil mushrooms, swinging pendulums, and axe-cutting robots before ultimately getting ambushed once more by Knuckles the Echidna. Knuckles once more believes that Sonic and Tails are behind everything, but is quickly shown that once again it's Robotnik. they drop down into the Chaos Chamber, a crystal cavern that amplifies the powers of the Chaos Emeralds, or at least Emerald, it's just one still, to keep Angel Island afloat. Robotnik has a siphon and has been siphoning energy to power the artillery that he's mounted on Angel Island, and intends on incinerating Knothole Village. Knuckles and friends are unable to destroy the siphon, and so Knuckles, in his infinite wisdom, decides to destroy the Chaos Emerald itself, causing the island to fall and forcing Robotnik to retreat, all the while cackling that the island will still fall on top of and destroy Knothole Village. After Robotnik retreats, Knuckles reveals that he actually swapped the emerald with a fake, the latter of which he had shattered while everyone was watching. Sonic offers Knuckles to join the Freedom Fighters, but he refuses, saying he has his own responsibilities, and there's a little bit at the end, that storytelling cliche where you have the person overlaid in the background that sort of makes it look like Knuckles died. We do get another story, Fire Drill, which we will be skipping, and then Lord of the Floating Island, an eclipse is going on, and the animals on Angel Island are freaking out. Knuckles saves a Joey from stampeding dingoes and reunites him with his mother, stating that he's always here to protect and serve. Yeah. It's not much to talk about, so that's why I just lumped it in here. I mean, I thought it was an interesting story, the main one. It's a retread of This Island Hedgehog, but it's got more nods to the Sonic and Knuckles game, like how that had nods to Sonic 3.
Right, it makes sense. Like, Sonic and Knuckles is basically just Sonic 3's second half, and there really isn't much plot besides, like, continuing the plot of Sonic 3. So it makes sense they pretty much just kind of didn't have much to go off of and pretty much just rehashed the plot of the last Knuckles story. That still was, like, a fine enough story. Like, if it is another case of it's continuing... Actually, no, this is pretty much the first time, really, that we see the recurring plot point across the Sonic franchise of Knuckles getting duped over and over and over and over and over. I God, I love my boy, but Jesus Christ, they do him dirty sometimes. Not so much in this story, but like I get a little tired of seeing Knuckles' gullibility played up so much.
Yeah, I imagine so. Knuckles was never my favorite character, but I can imagine that you would probably get very annoyed by that.
Yeah.
But one thing I did note at this point is that it's interesting to me how you can tell how much of an influence Penders and Spaziante have had over the story, and it becomes more apparent as we're continuing to phase out more episodic stories, how Sonic Archie is moving on to be more and more serialized, and all the designs for the characters are more and more shifting to match the way that Spaziante designed them. Because now everyone is drawing Robotnik in the same way as Spaziante, and everyone is drawing, like, Sonic and Friends the same way as Spaziante, though with obvious tells and differences with each person's art style. And I thought that was interesting.
Agreed. Also, a small thing of note that I just find funny, you mentioned the Chaos Chamber. You forgot to mention how they get into it, which is the Zoot Chute.
The Zoot Chute, yeah, they drop in, they pop up in a hole in the ground and drop in, and it's called the Zoot Chute.
I wish that was a singing cannon. Knuckles goes down the Zoot Chute.
Yeah, the Master Emerald just hidden in the Zoot Chute.
It feels like something out like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon or something.
Yeah, he just falls in and is dressed like Batman. It's like, oh, wrong chute.
It feels the name still crops up a lot when in future Knuckles stories as well, at least in this batch, which is just great.
That's weird because light foreshadowing, the Chaos Chamber ends up becoming important, and it's really weird how we get these stories that are getting more and more serious, but it's still called the Zoot Chute.
I did find it kind of amusing that they basically did the whole fake emerald fake-up thing that Sonic Adventure would later do several years beforehand, which I thought was kind of amusing.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cute. Like, surprisingly smart, especially given this point in the story where Sonic Adventure hasn't happened, so a lot of, like, the lore around the Chaos Emeralds hasn't been solidified yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Issue 26. Way past cool. Sonic and friends are beating the summer heat by playing around at a local river when a snowstorm comes in out of nowhere. They quickly deduce it is the result of Robotnik's meddling and try to find a shelter in a local cave to warm up before trying to find him. They end up meeting a group of Arctic Mobians who were displaced by Robotnik's takeover of Mobius and ended up creating an own ice machine, salvaging parts from Robotnik's destroyed mechs to have a small, centralized Arctic zone within the cave so that they could survive being displaced from the Arctic. Sonic and friends train within this zone, not to be confused with the zones found in all Sonic games, to get accustomed to the temperature before staging an attack on Robotnik. Snively partially freezes everyone neck down, but gets ambushed by the Arctic Mobians, and Sonic gets the Arctic Mobians to launch him on a catapult towards the weather machine, which breaking the ice that contained him, and then he promptly destroys the weather machine itself. The story ends with Sonic sending off the Arctic Mobians as they make their way back home with a renewed courage and confidence, and jokes that the Freedom Fighter should have a snowball fight before rightfully getting pelted for his insolence. What the fuck? Why did I write it like that?
It'd make the story a bit more interesting.
We also get Fortified. The gang stumble upon an old fort while exploring a mountain range, and because Sonic sprained his ankle prior to the start of the story, have to hold out there, preparing for a stand against Robotnik and his evil robot bus that Snively has been driving him in. They repurpose some of the metals from the old wartime cannons and fashion a massive unwieldy Iron Man-like suit of armor for Bunny, and they end up tricking Robotnik and Snively into charging Bunny, causing them to ram through a wall as she uses her extendo legs, and the two villains are sent hurtling down the mountain.
This comic sucks.
First things first, where the fuck did... First things first, where the fuck did Sally's vest go? It just disappeared again?
Well, it's back in the fort story, so...
Yeah, I also did not like this issue either. It was just really boring, honestly.
I was just really disappointed, because I didn't dislike CD as much as the CD adaptation as much as you did, and I really liked the Sonic and Knuckles comic. But this one just felt like it kind of stops the momentum that we were kind of going on for a second there, and just hits us with something that feels out of like the earlier batch. However, like the most like important thing, I guess, is we see another group of freedom fighters again, the Arctic batch, but like the Arctic group, but
they're not even freedom fighters; they're just Mobians.
Oh yeah, fair point. It's really not an interesting story. Like it's a pretty typical sudden weather change by the villain kind of plot, and then the second story is there. I was just so bored reading through this. Like what I was thinking, like when I was reading through this, just need to like flip through this story as fast as possible because I have nothing to add.
Yeah, no. There was some interesting fan art that I did show you earlier. Yeah. That is, I
did like the fan art.
It's a piece from Joshua McGill in Windsor Heights. Why does every time we get to fan art or sonograms, it's always a state that I don't always recognize the name? West Virginia, I think. Yeah, anyway, it's a drawing of Sonic looking helpless as he's being cornered by King Gong, Eve, Universe Salamander, Terminator, and Pseudo Sonic, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cute piece of fan art.
They're all drawn very on model, aside from, like, maybe Pseudo-Sonic and Sonic himself, who looks a bit scraggly, and I was just like, what kind of kid saw that nightmare fuel disco ball eyes of Eve and decided I'm gonna draw that?
That actually is pretty damn impressive. Like, it doesn't say how old the person that sent this in is, but still, like, Eve is it's the brain version of Eve as well, not like one of her earlier transformations. That's pretty impressive if that was like a kid or like teenager that drew them. That generally was like the most interesting part of the issue to me. Is the mental image of these five being like some sort of like fearsome five or whatever to Sonic, even though they are it's a very eclectic bunch of villains. One of which that reformed at the end of their story, and
one of which technically died.
Yes. Like, most of these are dead, basically. Like, the Terminator, like, the Terminator, or whatever he's pronounced, like, was still around at the end of his story. Pseudo-Sonic was trash. Universe Salamander has died twice now. And King Gong was presumably destroyed and scrapped at the end of his story when, like, he falls.
One thing that did amuse me, though, was the whole bit in Fortified in which Robotnik just has an evil tour bus that Stibley drives him around in. That was pretty good.
The one bit of that story that, like, stuck out to me, the stupid, like, tour bus thing that he uses to scale the forest.
Not much interesting in the sonograms, as is the unfortunate norm here, but we do get Nack being mentioned as we're going to be leading into the Triple Trouble special. But this time he is referred to with just an N and not with a KN, as is the PlayStation mascot, our Lord and Savior Nack. I'm cutting that out. I'm not saying that on the podcast.
Thank you. I was worried you were going to bring up fucking PS4 Nack at some point, honestly. When we were talking about Nack as in for Fang.
Yeah, well, fuck you, Vespa, you nerd. I'm keeping this in anyway. You won't even notice because you don't listen to these podcasts back in post. Why am I editing this at 6:35 in the morning? Also, I didn't know you were Canadian, Vespa.
What?
I also didn't know your name was Peter. Because there was, in fact, someone in the Sonicgrams. I'm not going to read it because it's not that noteworthy, but there was someone from Canada who wrote in to complain about how Bunny barely appears at all in these stories. So, yeah, didn't know you were Canadian.
Hey, someone agrees with me.
Triple Trouble number 1, with the titular story leading us in. Robotnik has in his possession a Chaos Emerald, but through bumbling between him and Crabmeat, gets destroyed in an explosion and split in two. He calls up Bounty Hunters Are Us to hire someone to retrieve the Emerald Shards before anyone else can. One of the emeralds lands in the Great Forest, creating a new zone, the same type of action zones found in all Sonic games, and Sonic chases off to explore it. We see a mysterious purple figure lurking in the distance as he does so. Meanwhile, Knuckles is woken up by the other Emerald Shard crashing into Mount Osohai, one of the mountains in the Dragon Spine mountain range. It's one of those ones where you don't get it until you read it out loud. And goes over to investigate. He gets knocked out by a stray rock. Sonic ends up entering a funhouse.
Poor Knuckles.
Sonic ends up entering a funhouse-style entrance towards Triple Trouble, being followed in secret by the purple bounty hunter from earlier. Because this is billed as a faithful adaptation of the Sonic Triple Trouble game, playable on your Sega Game Gear, we get a 2-page montage of Sonic going through every zone in said game and ends up in a Chaos Emerald Chamber, using his Figure 8 Super Peel-Out as featured in issue 25 to get to it before... Well, it's not quite certain. He just says he just made it, using his Figure 8 Super Peel-Out featured in issue 25, as previously mentioned. In any case, he gets ambushed and knocked out by the bounty hunter, revealing himself to be Nack the Weasel. Nack extorts Robotnik into paying him more for the second half of the Chaos Emerald and heads off in a sky cycle for Angel Island. Meanwhile, Knuckles wakes up from his unconsciousness and finds out that he's been nursed to health by the Ancient Walkers, a trio of racially insensitive witch doctor Mobians, because this is a comic from the 90s. You know they're problematic. We know they're problematic. Let's just move on from now, otherwise we'll be here all day. Fair. The Ancient Walkers paint on the cave wall and explain that the Chaos Emeralds naturally magnetize towards each other, and that if one of the halved shards splits even further than that, becoming a quarter shard, it would likely cause an explosion of energy that could destroy the entire island. One of the Ancient Walkers makes Knuckles smell from the bowl and causes them to immediately wake nearby Nack, whom he quickly dispatches of by punching him in the face and causing him to fall unconscious. Sonic bursts out of Nack's sky cycle and attacks Knuckles for basically no reason. The two fight, only to notice that Robotnik is calling in from Nack's wrist communicator for a status report. The two promptly weakened at Bernie's Nack into placating Robotnik, before promptly going down to Zoot Shoot to reunite the two halves of the emerald together. It disappears, and the two are teleported back to the surface of Angel Island. Though the two don't trust each other, Sonic departs from Knuckles with Nack in tow, and the Ancient Walkers are shown to celebrate a prophecy being fulfilled, starting a new cycle as they themselves come into possession of the Chaos Emerald.
Fucking Chaos Emerald lore is so weird in this comic so far.
Submersible rehearsal. Tails has a submarine built for him by Rotor, only to be revealed that it's not functional as it lacks oil. Frustrated that he's being treated like a kid, as it's revealed in a later Sonicgram that Tails is 10 years old now and not 5. We'll get into that.
I actually realized that.
Tails makes to storm off in a frustrated huff, but finds a seagull covered in oil that fled from one of Robotnik's underwater roboticizers. Tails squeezes the oil from the seagull off-screen, thankfully, to power his submarine and ends up easily dispatching of the Octobot as well as the roboticizer. And then there's another story that we're skipping here.
Yeah.
Why is the comic racist, Vespa?
Because it's the 90s, and for whatever reason, witch doctors were a very popular subject to represent natives, I suppose. I did.
Something we also realized way later. If Knuckles is meant to be Australian at this point in the comic, doesn't that make the Ancient Walkers Aboriginal stereotyping? Ugh.
I knew there was some problematic stuff in these early issues, but I did not know about these guys beforehand.
I didn't either, I'm gonna be perfectly honest.
I generally got, shocked. I was shocked when I saw, those fuckers, when they appear in the Triple Trouble story.
Yeah, we ended up both putting in massive text something to the effect of, "Oh no, we're getting racist again."
Yeah, also I remember noticing on one of their necklaces of the Witch Doctor guys, it looks like it has, the logo of, a car company. I forget which one, but, it's the green guy.
Yeah, it just looks like the Prius logo.
Prius, yeah. I just kind of chalked it up to, dumb joke, because, they probably, as a native symbol, they just decide, it's front of the car logo, haha. If that's what their intention is.
Also, again, we mentioned in episode 0, don't harass anyone, these are just people, and these were just trends in the 90s. We're all getting worked up, but this is all in mostly good fun, while also being very critical of bad stuff. Also, this wasn't written by Penders, it was written by Gallagher, so it's not even just a matter of, Ken Penders is a racist, because we'll get to that later on, but no, this was Gallagher's fault.
Yeah. Putting that shit aside, I kind of like this issue. I can't say partially why, because it relates to one of the stories that we cannot talk about yet. The Triple Trouble story is, for the most part, pretty alright. But I still have some other qualms, the fucking zones aspect and the Chaos Emerald lore is just... bewildering to me. I do not understand what they are doing with this, and, like, I think I said it to you, I don't know how much of the weird lore they've come up with for the emeralds and zones come from who. Like, I'm assuming, I guess, Gallagher was the ones that came up with this, or maybe, like, they come together, like, think up the stuff. I don't know. But, like, the zones thing in this, they change up the rules again, because it's not just, like, a singular zone that Robotnik makes. It is the entirety of Triple Trouble. Like, it creates this, like, little, like, carnival attraction thing. And it's even called Welcome to Triple Trouble.
It's really stupid.
It's clearly just something that they forced in to advertise the latest Game Gear game.
I do think at this point, like, with what we later see, it does seem to be solidified that zones are made by Chaos Emeralds, as stupid as that is.
But I'm also just kind of wondering, like, how the hell did Robotnik get his hands on an emerald at the start of this? Given that it seemed like...
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, fair enough. Also, one thing I want to bring up about the Triple Trouble Zone, at the end of the, like, little montage thing, we see, I guess, like, a replica of Robotnik or something. Like, it's seen in the zone's creation as well. You can see, like, a little Robotnik in some sort of spaceship flying by as the zone is being made. And also, well, for one thing, what is this Robotnik? Like, there's now just, like, a second Robotnik that
this looks like a Toontown cog.
Yeah, and also, something I found kind of funny, he says, as he, like, destroys Robotnik at the end, there's nothing like fried Eggman.
Wait, yeah! What the fuck?
First appearance of Eggman in the, one of the first appearances of Eggman in the West.
I like to think that Spaziante just played the Game Gear game with everyone else just huddled by him.
Oh yeah, also something that's going to crop up a lot in this comic. They'd really like to remind you of the Super Peel Out from issue 25. Just gotta really want to sell you on that Super Peel Out shit.
Yeah. Yeah,
like why people give a shit about this stupid thing. Like, it's a neat looking move, but like, it just seems like
it just also doesn't feel like a power move. It's just he moves his feet fast. Like, they don't really explain how it's different from anything other than he moves faster.
Yeah, it's dumb. And also, I want to talk about Nack because he's always been one of my favorite of, like, at least the classic, since classic's now its own universe. Fuck you, Sega. He's always been one of my favorite. He's always been one of my favorite Sonic characters since I first saw him. But because I never had, like, unsurprisingly, I didn't have a Game Gear, and I only, like, briefly borrowed it from a friend who only had Sonic 2 on it. And
how can you say you're a fan of Fang the Weasel when you don't even own a Game Gear to play his game on?
Hey, I have Sonic the Fires on Xbox. That's enough. Like, I never knew for years just how much of an absolute chump Fang is. Like, part of me wants to be upset, like, how, like, they knock him out, like, halfway through the story. Like, he shows, like, they, like, camped at him for the first half, and then, like, when, like, in the third part of the story, when he kidnaps Sonic, he immediately gets knocked out by Knuckles and is pretty much out of the story for the rest of it. And on one hand, I want to be bummed about that we didn't get a proper Fang Nack fight, whatever you want to call him. On the other hand, knowing what he was like in Triple Trouble, given, like, he doesn't really appear that much and only appears in the special stages where he's... And for the most part in the game, he's played off as kind of just a bumbling dumbass who comically foils himself. I feel like it fits, unfortunately. Like, as much as I love Fang, he is a total chump. And what little we've seen of Superstars, even though it seems like he's going to be a bit more of a threat, he's still kind of a chump, and now he's saddled with an even bigger chump and Trip. That's going to be a lot of fun.
One interesting thing I like about him is that he seems the most competent of anyone in the series thus far, given he will repeatedly get one over on Sonic. But the problem with him is that he's not able to keep that one over on Sonic. Yeah. Because he knocks him out. He just gets knocked out right after.
Yeah.
And also,
I was going to say, like, maybe it's because they can't use the gun, but, like, we see people using guns, like, before and after this, so...
I also do not like how he's drawn here. He looks really weird. I think Spaziante is the only artist that does him credit. This is just showing the demographic I'm a part of. He looks like a reject from Jetpack Pets, the comics from the Disney Adventure magazines.
Okay, that's something I've heard of.
Like, I'll send it to Vespa, but he just looks like Princess from Jetpack Pets. Like, with a weird, like, cone nose.
God, yeah. I think maybe I have seen this before somewhere. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Like, he just looks very goofy, very pop art compared to, like, every other character, and it's just a bit jarring to me in comparison. Also, damn it, I hate that the Ancient Walkers are cute, given they're very not okay for the matter of existing.
I would say this about the Ancient Walkers, at least they don't talk, like, so we don't have any sort of racist, tribal speak written by an American. So there's that, at least. That one saw it.
I do believe this is the debut of Pender's art, but unfortunately, again, we can't talk about it. It looks okay. Right. Like, people usually, like, rag on Penders for his art style now. His art style was fine back then. It just looked like everyone else's, except characters are a bit, like, wall-eyed.
I was gonna say they're a little too on-model, especially with, like, Knuckles.
It's more that, for me, it's more that they just have, like, vacant stares. And honestly, I disagree with you saying they're too on-model, as we'll get into a later story in this batch, I think. I mean...
Fair. Like, I guess it's more, like, less on-model, more just traced. Also, understandably, we don't have much to say about the Tails story. Like, the most interesting thing of note is it's the introduction of the Sea Fox, which is a vehicle that Tails has in some of the Game Gear games, including Triple Trouble. I thought it was kind of neat to see.
Yeah, I thought that was cute. You know, fuck it, I will let you have this. The way Penders draws and depicts Vector in the story that we're skipping over is just really goofy. Yeah. It's just really fucking silly looking.
There's a great panel shot of him at the end with, like, Knuckles, like, sitting over a cliff. It's dimly lit. And then you just see, like, a tiny, like, correctly colored Vector,
he's meant to be, like, it's meant to be the character's, like, cloaked in shadow because it's nighttime, but then Vector is just completely lit up. It's really weird. It's really fucking funny.
Like, it looks like it's like a tense moment and all. And then you just see this cartoon crocodile going, "Hey, Knuckles, what's up?"
Yeah.
No, it's Knuckles, what's up, my man? You're way too quiet. I'm trying to do, like, the hero's Vector.
Yeah. I get that. We get into issue 27 now, A Scrambled Hedgehog.
Oh, no.
Two spies for the Freedom Fighters, both inexplicably named after Sir Mix-a-Lot and Snoop Doggy Dogg. You can probably guess what one of them's race is. We've coded information on a wall in Robotropolis. Sonic moves in to pick up this message and learn, like, the information. They're meant to be spies, but is quickly ambushed by SWAT bots and knocked out. It's revealed at Robotnik's base that he has amnesia, and Robotnik quickly realizes that he can use this to his advantage, quickly convincing Sonic that he's their mentor and that the Freedom Fighters are evil insurgents. After training on the robot duplicates left over from the Sally miniseries, Sonic is sent off to find Knothole Village, where Robotnik's demolition tractors homing in on them to follow after the location has been confirmed. Not remembering where Knothole is, Sonic finds the tree stump that leads to the base, and the Freedom Fighters try in vain to stop Sonic from reaching the base. This leads then into issue 28, Saturday Night's Alright for a Fight. Sonic fights off the various Freedom Fighters, including what I've dubbed the Neo Freedom Fighters, being the members from the Sally miniseries. Penelope the Porcupine ultimately ends up knocking out Sonic in an ambush, and his memory is restored as he comes to. Sonic then tricks Robotnik into sending his demolishers off a cliff.
I thought it was an alright story. Like, it's not one of my favorites. I think I'd like it more if the art's better.
I actually really liked this story. I thought it was fun seeing a story in which, like, there feels like there's actual momentum and stakes in which Sonic is convinced that the freedom fighters are evil and all that. I did feel like it ends up deflating a bit in issue 28, because they're very easily able to save the day after the Neo Freedom Fighters come in. I was not expecting them to come back.
Yeah, same here. I was going to refer to them as, like, the junior Freedom Fighters. I felt like that fits them more given they're rookies. But yeah, it was... Their appearance was something, I suppose. I do like the story. I just wish the art... I don't like the artist for... Like, the art for these 2 issues. And I also really wish that Sleuth, Donkey Dog, and Kicks a Lot were not a fucking thing. I remember... This is one of the panels I've been spoiled on through Thanks Ken Penders. I remember just seeing... Like, I saw it out of context. Just wondering, like, what the fuck am I looking at? Why is he Sonic? Is this the same... Why? It looks like just 2 regular ass, like, human size, well, because, like, they're in the SWAT bot suits. I guess it makes them taller, as tall as, like, the SWAT bots. But it just seems like 2, like, human size, like, realistically, like, drawn dogs. And it just looks so weird, especially with these fucking names. Like, the story, it's like a pretty typical, like, Amnesia, swap side kind of story, but, like, it's still fun to see the freedom fighters get put on the ropes and, like, Sonic having to be a threat for them, as well as just the fact that now it seems to solidify that, like, it's not always just the little stump in the ground, it is a full-on village, as, like, we see in Set AM.
Yeah, and also the tunnels that lead into Knothole as a base have been greatly expanded upon, because that's part of the conflict, is trying to stop Sonic before he gets to the base. It's not just a slip and slide anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that part. Oh yeah, there's also a throwaway line that kind of cracked me up. Like, it's one of those, like, transition lines. It's Robotnik going, "You know, Simley, now I remember why I prefer crab meat over you."
Right?
I get it. That really did get a good laugh out of me.
I'm glad Robotnik agrees that crab meat is the best. We did get some weird sonograms, nothing that I'd need to read out particularly, other than there's one person who was a fan of Robotnik, I believe one person saying that Sonic should run for president, and then one person asked what nationality Jeffrey is, and despite being very James Bond coded, he's referred to as Australian, and I was like, what? But Pender said he's British!
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's meant to be a British accent when we see him in the miniseries.
I was just so confused.
Like, if he was meant to be Australian, you probably have, like, the hat and vest of, like, the typical Australian stereotype.
We also have Freddie Mendez leaving as editor because he's moving on to, like, other sections of Archie, which was interesting. He basically did not work on that much before leaving, but, you know, it was interesting to me. And then we get into the other story, which we're going to lump together as well, because otherwise it's just gonna be a bit weird. We have Growing Pains, which starts in issue 28 and moves on to issue 29. Tails, upset that Sonic beat him up in the previous story, despite the extenuating circumstances, leaves in his submarine and stumbles upon an island where, because Robotnik was spying on him, a trap awaits in the form of a leftover duplicate robot from the Sally miniseries, fashioned to resemble a fox girl named Fiona. The two quickly fall in love, montage ensues, and then Tails is taken to a roboticizer, where it's revealed, of course, Fiona's a robot. Tails ends up destroying the roboticizer by jamming it with his 2 tails, even though it's not how roboticizers work. And then gets attacked by Fiona. Tails dispatches of Robotnik by swinging an entire ass palm tree into him, and then gets chased by Fiona into the river, who rusts in the middle of trying to drown Tails. Tails leaves off to adventure on his own, separate from the freedom fighters, as a motionless Fiona cries to herself that she's alone. I don't care about the story.
I hate the story so much.
It's really bad, and it also made me uncomfortable at points because the jokes they made with Fiona attacking Tails, which I realize fully that I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but as someone who's dealt with abuse in relationships before, made me very uncomfortable.
I didn't... I was just so checked out as soon as Fiona showed up that I was barely paying attention. I didn't even realize it until you brought that up after the fact, and that just made the story so much worse to me, because I fucking hate this story so much. This is...
I don't hate it as much as you, but as mentioned, it did make me really uncomfortable for my own personal reasons.
I can definitely get that. For me, I just found it fucking annoying and weird. And also, at the time, I didn't realize Tails was meant to now be 10, so just weird seeing a 5-year-old fall in love with a girl fox. And also, Fiona's design is basically a female red version of Tails with a hairdo and bow.
I would say more it's what if Sally was, what if the orange and black-haired Sally from the mini-series was a fox?
That's a good point. I guess it's the Tails and a Tails and Sally robot, combined together. Given he says the duplicates from the Sally mini-series.
I'll move this point here because it's prescient, but according to the Sonicgrams, the reason Tails is 10 years old now is because of when he ate from the Tree of Wisdom way earlier, that after its effects wore off, Tails was aged to be 5 years older.
What the fuck?
I
that
don't
is
know.
Horrifying.
In fact, let me just read this off to you so you can understand it.
I never knew this before.
Let's see. So someone is asking why Tails is 10 in the cartoon but 5 in the comics, and so they say Tails is both, sort of. Now you're probably wondering, how is that possible, Sonic? Oh god, because it's meant to be written from the perspective of Sonic.
Oh yeah.
Let me explain. Tails used to be 5 years old, both body and mind. That was until he ate that last apple from the Tree of Wisdom, and he became some kind of super brain from issue 14. When he became himself again, he found out that eating the apple had a side effect. Tails had grown 5 years of his life, now making him 10 years old, body and mind.
What?
Wow.
What?
Wow, I'd have to be some kind of super brain to explain it so you can understand it. I think I did a pretty good job, right, guys? Guys?
I really hope that's not... I hope that's not canon. It's meant to be a joke, because holy shit, that is really messed up. What the fuck? I never knew that before. That is... I wish I didn't. I just wish that they just said... No, he's just 10 now. One of the few times I wish they didn't give an explanation for the retcon. That is just so... That is terrifying. I was going to say, oh, he's, 10 years older of mine, but still the body of his 5-year-old age, but no, he aged, somehow the brain fruit aged him 5 years as well. I'm trying to remember, what Rotor said about that fruit in the issue it came out, how long he had to wait. Well, it just makes me wonder, if he... I forget, how long he said, he had to wait for the fruit to ripen or whatever. But it does just make me wonder, since I think Rotor's meant to be, a teenager along with the rest of the majority of the Freedom Fighters, would that make him, a grown-ass man? If the whole 5-year,
yeah, just continued accelerating aging till just ends up having to go through a microwave hallway and all that. I don't get why they thought this was a good idea. It's really weird.
The way that they frame it at the end, it makes me hope that it's just a jokey thing, because it's, at least so far, that's never been brought up in the comics. That is so weird. One last thing I want to talk about, this is the point when Gallagher's sense of humor just really started to wear on me, and just how jarring it feels at times. It gets worse, I feel, in some of the later issues of this batch, but like there's a lot of points where like the comic just stops for like some sort of reference or gag, and like one of the ones that just stood out to me as weird was like there's a bit where we cut to Robotnik monologuing, and then there's just like a reference to like him bringing up Alfred Hitchcock to talk about the MacGuffin, and they do the Alfred Hitchcock Presents shadow gag. Yeah. Kids are gonna love that. I know like animatics have done that as well, like in the 90s, but like it just felt distracting to me.
I didn't think it was that bad, honestly. It's just a weird bit for indulgent writers. Like, we've had that with Penders before. We're gonna keep having that afterwards.
It just gets annoying sometimes. And this is also a lead into the Tales miniseries, which we'll regretfully get into later.
Damn, you really don't like that. Anyway, issue 29, proper, Steel-Belted Sally. Leading into this, I genuinely was disappointed that Sonic was knocked out and everything was fine, given I thought it was going to directly lead into this issue, because the cover is of Sally directly getting roboticized, and I thought, oh, that's going to be interesting. But no. We're given a brief introduction of Dulcie the Dragon from SatAM Season 2, which we'll cover in the next episode, the next bonus-ode, as we wrap up the SatAM miniseries. Which, to clarify, will be out on the 28th, because we recorded this episode and the next in the same batch, and I just want to make sure we don't accidentally spoil anything by putting it out on the 21st instead. But in any case, Dulcie flies around Sonic, and they stumble upon a crashed Robotnik hovercraft, which contains a de-roboticizer that later on is sus to have at least one charge's worth of power. Bunny turns down the idea of being de-roboticized and instead gets the absolutely asinine plan to instead have one of the other freedom fighters fully roboticized and have them spy on Robotnik, which Sally promptly thinks is a brilliant idea and offers herself as the subject. Rotor fashions a neuro-overrider so that Sally can keep her autonomy whilst getting roboticized, implying that she was willing to get herself roboticized without even knowing that this was a thing that could be made for her, and then sets off for Robotropolis. Sally gets roboticized and neuro-overrider is removed immediately. Brilliant. Sonic and the Freedom Fighters head to Robotnik's lair to meet up with Sally, only to get accosted by her and sent to the roboticizing chambers. It's revealed that the de-roboticizer was not held in any of their possessions, but is instead held by Dulcie, who wasn't even going to be part of this mission, but ended up heading towards Robotropolis just thinking something was up. Dulcie swoops in and de-roboticizes Sally, and then the group go back to Knothole having accomplished nothing. Let me get a Foley prop. Hold on.
Oh no.
This comic sucks!
God damn it. If you can't tell, she's been watching a lot of Linkara recently.
Hilariously enough, it is another Ken Penders work I just threw down that we'll get into way later.
Yeah, it is also a part of the Tales story, so I'm kind of inclined to agree by association of that shit being a part of this, but yeah, it was kind of thing, like, when I was reading through this, I didn't really think it was that bad at first until I got to the part where I realized, oh my god, it's Dulcie. Wait a minute. And I think you also mentioned why you hated this issue so much at the same time. It just kind of made me, it just had this domino effect of realizing, wow, this is a really stupid plot.
It's just such an asinine plan. I don't understand why any of it made sense to anyone, or how they managed to go through with it. I was just so annoyed by it. I had, like, as Vespa mentioned, I had a bit of a Combine Harvester moment in which I was just like, I literally wrote down, what the fuck is this plan? Why are they not using the roboticizer on Uncle Chuck? Why are they letting Sally get roboticized? What does this accomplish? What is going on? Why? Like, I really got really upset reading this, and I realized that I'm getting upset at a children's cartoon comic, but like, yeah, it was so dumb.
It is. It's really dumb. I feel like the only reason this story exists is to have Dulcie be introduced and save the day in a very clumsy and awkward way. But I know that, like, that Dulcie is not a fan favorite, and that she's kind of an annoying, we've not yet watched that AM season 2 yet, but I know at least that Dulcie's, like, meant to be, like, the comical, like, kid appeal, like, comic relief character who's, like, very bumbling, but, like, in a sweet way, and a lot of fans are...
Yeah, she's like a cat.
Like, I know a lot of... Well, she's a lot sweeter than a cat, I'd say. The average cat. That's not fair. I do have some sweet cats, but, like, getting aside the point, I think she's, at least in this story, fine. Like, I know a lot of Sonic fans aren't a fan of her inclusion, especially just how awkwardly she's introduced in Season 2. Like, just kind of drop her in, like, the dragon's part of the Freedom Fighters now. Accept it. It is a weird thing to just suddenly drop a completely brand new character and one that is a dragon onto, like, the start of a season, or at least in the start of, like, a new issue of Sonic, since we get a bit of her backstory, but we don't get an explanation as to how she met the Freedom Fighters. It's just more, and then she met up with the Freedom Fighters, and back to the present day.
Yeah, it's... Yeah. It just feels so crowbarred in, honestly. Other things from the Sonograms I didn't mention, it's meant... Dylan from the mini-series, which I didn't understand what they were. Yes, they're a porcupine. I think we mentioned it as well, but Antoine is 18, which just absolutely baffles me. Bunny is listed as from the southern quadrant of Mobius, so she's from the south. And it's confirmed that Boomer was the nickname for Rotor, made to make fun of his voice when everyone was kids, and it's elaborated on in a later Sonogram that's because he had a loud, booming voice, which, if you watch Sad AM, no he doesn't. Not.
No, I was just assuming, like, I remember hearing the thing about, like, Boomer was his nickname as, like, a retcon later on, but I was just assuming, like, it was because, like he was, like, a bumbling inventor, and, like, his stuff would go boom a lot by accident, because he's a kid, and, like, didn't know better at the time to make inventions and stuff, not because he apparently has a booming voice, which he doesn't even really have in the present day either. It's a weird way to explain it, but alright.
Alright. Speaking of alright, Vespa's not alright, because we're about to get into Tales number 1.
Fucking Tales miniseries. Are we going to tackle this, like, issue by issue or the full thing?
We're gonna just do it all at once.
Good.
Like we did with the Sally miniseries. Booger. Sorry. And that's how I feel about the Tales minis. Southern crossover. Robotnik begins sending off a cloaked blimp of supplies and SWAT bots to his regional robo-underboss in the land of Down Under. Tails stumbles into this blimp as it's revealed that the cloaking device does not work from underneath. Remember that Tails is just meandering about on his submarine in the ocean because he's upset with how he's being treated like a kid. And promptly gets attacked by SWAT bots as well as the Octobot from earlier. He's left to drown as we cut to a conversation between Robotnik and underboss Crocbot, and it's learned that the latter intends to betray the former and take over the world himself. Cutting back to Tails, he's quickly saved by the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters, who barely play a part in this story, so we're not going to linger on their names. The F4 take Tails to Down Under, only for him to be quickly accosted by winged dingoes, Crocbot's own robot militia. The Down Under Freedom Fighters quickly step in to save the day and give us their names via the writer's cliche of making sure each person mentions the person they're responding to in conversation by their full name. We have Wombat Stew, Guru Emu, the hippie stereotype, Barbie Koala, the girl, Duck Bill, the platypus, and their leader, Walt Wallaby. A winged dingo swoops in and kidnaps Wombat Stew. Crocbot removes the cloaking device on the blimp and begins war with the DFF. Tails wakes up in a crater being taken there by Walt and stumbles into the fucking ancient walkers again because god fucking damn it, we can't have nice things here. This time, however, we're met alongside Altair, an echidna who later reveals himself to be the great-grandfather of Knuckles. Altair describes backstory for the echidna ancestors involving science, meteors, and a reason Angel Island is floating, but we're saving that for when we get to the Knuckles plot we've been continually skipping. Speaking of skipping echidna lore, Tails is having none of this racist bullshit and tries to make his way out, only to be forced to learn about the creation myth of Mobius being the evolutionary story of primordial ooze evolving into dinosaurs, but instead of meteors, it's Chaos Emeralds crashing through the sky. The Chaos Emeralds are being described as having inspired cultural wonders, pagan worship, technological advances, as well as having the potential for being used as weapons of mass destructions. We're given Chosen One bullshit about how one will gather the emeralds and the great harmony will begin. Altair and the Ancient Walkers disappear as Barbie literally crashes into the scene, having being attacked by the CD-ROM RAM, the evil robot that the Crocbot has been sending off against the DFF, that we skipped over a scene in accounting parts of this ancient prophecy storyline that are unique to this issue. The group quickly dispatch of the CD-ROM RAM and end up destroying the blimp as well. Crocbot tries to chase after them with a tank, but the hippie stereotype ends up sneaking him careening into the crater from before, blowing up in a nuclear explosion that forms a mushroom cloud in the shape of Altair. Tails leaves Knothole after celebrating victory with the DFF and the 4F. I didn't actually hate this.
Okay, to be fair, like, I don't like this story as much, but, like, remembering it, like, I think it's because I just lumped the whole setup thing of, like, the Fiona Fox story with it in my mind. That's kind of what, like, part of why I just didn't like this, because I feel like that's just a part of the mini-series as well, but, like, the mini-series is alright. I mean, it's also just the fact that I don't, as I said before, I just find Gallagher's gags annoying to deal with, and I also just do not like the racist-ass echidna design in Ancient Walkers, and, like, the lore of, like, that he brings up we'll get into later, but, like, it's just so weird, and I guess we can say my thoughts for that when we get to the echidna stuff, but I wasn't a fan of some aspects of the echidna lore that we learn. It's sad to say. But also, I just find, like I said, this was the point when Gallagher's humor was really starting to get tiring for me. Like the fucking CD-ROM RAM.
And it's something we learned between episodes that I've been waiting for a good moment to mention it. Gallagher is mostly known for writing issues of Mad.
Yeah, and when you brought that up to me, like, earlier this week, it just made everything fit together. Like, I don't know how much you have experienced. I know both of us have watched the Mad cartoon, but I don't know how much of the comics and manga. The comics and magazine... The comics and magazine of Mad that you've experienced, like, I am not, like, very familiar with it as well, but, like, I did read, like, some collections of it growing up, and I would read the occasional issue, but I've just never really been a fan of Mad. And to explain what Mad is for those at home that don't know, at least the comic magazine itself, it was basically like an old magazine that would parody and lampoon culture of the time. That would also had a lot of just really lame, shallow parodies of whatever's relevant at the time. Think the 2000s movie craze of Seltzerberg, but, like, even more shallow and mean, just as mean. But I think it also gave us Spy versus Spy, so it's not all bad. But yeah, like, when you brought that up, like, it made so much sense to me. Like the really corny gags, the puns, the sense of humor, as well as, like, stuff like that. I forget which issue it was, the one where Sonic beats up all the robots based after other comic books, other popular comic book characters. Like, that feels about like something you'd see in, like, a Mad comic, like making a bunch of, like, dumb, corny parodies of famous superheroes. Like, that felt very Mad-esque to me. I don't hate the story. Like, I just kind of lump
it's just boring.
Thing.
I just didn't really feel like Tails had his own personality. He just felt like Sonic, but younger, I guess.
Yeah, they like to bring up a lot with Gallagher is like, I'm not a little kid, I'm a grown-up! And I guess he did grow up some with the stupid brain fruit thing. But good lord, it gets so tiring. I think I said it to you. I think what annoyed me about the Tails miniseries as well is coming off of, like, Saturday M and, to a lesser extent, Adventure Sonic, which we had watched, like, before we read through this comic. It just felt jarring going from, like, sweet little young Tails from the cartoons to a Tails that was very clearly written by a grown-ass man, and it's just so assertive of the fact that he's not a little kid, he's a grown boy, he's independent, he can do what he wants, and then immediately, of course, gets screwed over and needs help, because of course, God forbid, Tails be useful and independent. I think I said in my notes, I owe Force an apology. This is my least favorite portrayal of Tails, honestly.
Oh, God, yeah.
Putting Tails' portrayal aside, there is some other neat bits of lore, like we get the introduction of a new villain that works under, like a new villain that has a personality of his own. That is not just like a one-off bad guy that Sonic defeats in like the issue he comes in. He's like a villain, like he's not like, Crocbot is not like that deep of a villain, like it's a pretty typical, yeah, he is, it's like a very like stereotypical Aussie villain. And I at least find the idea of him wanting to try and take over Robotnik's position and steal his robots with the image. One of the few gags that did crack me up, the image of him stealing the SWAT bots is a before and after of the SWAT bots. Like, before is it the regular SWAT bot, and after is just, he put the little Australian cap on it to represent him brainwashing them.
It's yeah.
That genuinely cracked me up just how stupid it looked. Yeah, he's like a fine enough villain. I also like the designs of his flying dingo robots.
Yeah.
And as lame and weird as like some of the Freedom Fire designs look like, especially the 40 Fathom Freedom Fires, who are just aquatic animals that look like something out of again, Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Like, I at least like the idea of this with them in the Down Under, Freedom Fires, like, it's basically just Australia. But like, even though neither of them are really that characterized, like, the only characterization that stands out is Guru Emu, who is basically what, like, the stereotypical hippie character.
I hated him. I hated him so much.
Yeah, I hated him too, until he suddenly snapped at the end and became super violent and wanted to blow up Crocbot as he was escaping. Like, that caught me off guard. Like, I know it's like a classic kind of like bait and switch gag thing, but it's still like, at least it's got a laugh out of me, kinda. But like, the rest of the Down Under Freedom Fighters are just kind of there. Like, they don't really get characterized that much, I'd say. And you're alright that, like, Tails it doesn't feel like this is much of a Tails mini-series. Like, he's just gets wrapped up, he just kind of gets thrown into things, and for the most part, like, other people are doing a lot of the work, or take over as, like, to, like, give exposition, like, with the echidna stuff. Like, it doesn't really have much to do with Tails, really.
The last thing I do want to mention, though, is the cover. Like, the other covers are fine, other than one of Tails looking worried, and it's just really weird looking. But the last cover of the miniseries is of Crocbot in his tank. And for some reason, Crocbot is insanely off-model, looking super not photorealistic, but like way more detailed than he actually is. And it just is completely out of place from everything else.
Yeah. it's kind of disappointing. Like, I know not all of these covers are representative of what happens inside, but this looks way cooler than the confrontation we get at the end, and I love the design for this Crocbot. Like, when I first, like, saw this, I was thinking, like, oh, Crocbot transforms, and this is, like, the final fight and something, and Altair comes in to help Tails, but not even close. It is not representative at all of what happens at the end. And it does not look anything like the Crocbot in the comic itself. It's weird. There's one more fun fact I want to bring up about the new character, Altair. Altair, thank you. He is possibly like the only Archie character to make an appearance outside of Sat AM, given he actually did appear in an episode of Sonic Underground. Oh
my god.
Yeah, there goes the picture. And that's what his design looks like. It's just underground Knuckles with a blue robe, green glasses, and a staff.
It's really stupid looking, I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, like, it's not as racist looking as his design in
dumb
this.
Looking.
But it still looks really stupid. If we ever talk about Underground, we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah.
It's just weird to me to see Knuckles having alive relatives, much less a great grandfather as well.
Issue 30, the Uncle Chuck, as I mistakenly...
The Uncle Chuck.
As I mistakenly read it as... Sonic reminisces about Uncle Chuck after having a dream where he's stuffed to the brim with chili dogs, having too much to eat. Meanwhile, Robotnik has repaired the trans-dimensional transporter he used to imprison King Inkhorn, that through meddling accidentally gets himself transported into the void. It's later elaborated on in issue 36 that despite the same technology being used, this is a separate dimension from that which King Acorn has been imprisoned in, and is the void and not the zone of silence. Snively, being opportunistic, decides to hell with him and decides to take over, believing he can crush the rebellion far better than Robotnik ever could. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Uncle Chuck was accidentally teleported outside of Robotropolis and has free will again. He opts to help the Freedom Fighters as a spy. Snively engages in his own plan to destroy the Freedom Fighters by constructing a new plane that contains a portal into the void, which he then uses to kidnap Sonic and also level the nearby forest. This is interrupted, however, by a bot plane, revealed to be piloted by Uncle Chuck, attacking Snively, as well as him dropping down Robotnik into Snively's plane, as it's revealed Uncle Chuck rescued him from the void under the promise that he would not harm the Freedom Fighters or Snively, and the story wraps up with more jokes about Sonic enjoying chili dogs. We also get the story, Who Keeps Stealing My Chaos Emeralds? Robotnik complains that someone is stealing emeralds from under his nose and sends coconuts out to try and intercept them. Slapstick hijinks ensue, and it's revealed that Bunny Rabbit had taken them to accessorize for a charity dance. I don't know what to say in this recap. That's about it. It's only 4 pages long.
It just feels like page filler, the second story. And it's also just, I know, not to think too much on it. MST free K mantra. Repeat yourself, it's just a comic, I should just relax. But it's just weird to me that Chaos Emeralds are still just... Chaos Emerald lore is just so weird in this comic.
It's so inconsistent, like basically everything in Sonic at this point.
Yeah, it's also, like we said before, the emeralds... Like, not everything about the emeralds, like, was clear at the time, but they still existed, were used multiple times, and were different colored, so it's weird to see them still use just green emerald rocks that do whatever the plot needs it to, basically. Mm-hmm. But, like, the first story, for the most part, I like. I think, like, 2 gripes I have is, one that, like, things get a little too fast-paced. Like, the Uncle Chuck thing just feels kind of sudden. Like, he just gets caught in the crossfire of, like, the Robotnik being captured and Snively deciding to take over thing, and he's back to normal now. No issue, really, and he's working alongside Freedom Fighters. Like, I'm not complaining too much, because Uncle Chuck's awesome.
Yeah.
The other issue is, They really like to remind us that Sonic likes chili dogs. Did you know that Sonic loves chili dogs? Chili dogs are so good, he just loves to bring them up every other fucking page. It's just something that just annoys me in general with 90s American Sonic, just how much they bring up this love of chili dogs. Because it happens a lot in Underground, too. To an obnoxious extent that made this aspect kind of wear thin on me a bit. It doesn't ruin the story, but it just gets repetitive hearing, like, we get it, it's like, you like his chili talks.
Yeah, I did think it was just really weird how it's sudden, like, oh, Uncle Chuck's saved now. It's, like, very abrupt, and, like, the cover, again, is meant to be, like, Sonic hiding in an alleyway, and Uncle Chuck is looking for him menacingly, and so I thought, oh, this is going to be a more serious story. No, it's just Snively snaps and takes over, and Uncle Chuck is fine now. And I was like...
Yeah, they also show Mutsky. Like, he didn't show up in this.
Yeah, Mutsky's just nowhere.
Yeah, I really like the cover for this, and it kind of disappointed me that it's not entirely representative of the story itself.
That was me with 29, with the Sally cover.
Fair enough. I kind of like the Snively plot line, but at the same time, it's a little jarring given the last time Robotnik was captured. Like, I know, like, the last time Robotnik was vanished, he was an absolute mess. But of course, like, when he comes back, he realizes, oh great, my boss is back. It goes back to realizing maybe I shouldn't be careful what I wish for. So I guess I kind of get it, but it's also just weird to me because, like, he goes from having, like,
he's also, like, amenable, like, he calls him a big doof in that story as well. Like, he enjoys working under Robotnik because the whole joke is that, like, he doesn't really know how to think for himself, and so he enjoys being subservient to Robotnik. But then we have him being like, I'm done with this shit, and it's like, what?
Yeah, like, I don't mind this concept. I just wish it was built up more besides just, like, that throwaway gag from, like, a throwaway line from the issue where Robotnik comes back, where he's like, great, Robotnik's back. Like, be careful what you wish for. But, like, because, like, with Snively after that, there's kind of, he goes back to just being kind of there to be bounced off of Robotnik and not really grovel, but, like, do what he commands and just kind of there. So it just feels weird to see him go, like, oh, I'm gonna fucking destroy all of Mobius! I don't care if this plan is insane! I'm doing what you can't, boss! Like, it's just weird to see him, like, be that crazed to the point where Robotnik needs to team up with the crew briefly to stop him.
We also get... You go on.
It's a fine story. That's what I was going to say.
We also get a sneak peek of the next special, but we're just going to skip past that because we're about to cover that special, being the Knuckles Chaotix Issue 1 special. Main story, The Chaos Effect.
I didn't even notice a sneak peek before.
An amusement park is opened up on Angel Island, much to Knuckles' chagrin. The owner, Renfeld T. Roden, ends up leading all the freedom fighters into the Hall of Mirrors, who, aside from Knuckles, who just loses his natural ability to use his dreadlocks to glide, as well as his strength, gets trapped in the mirrors because it was an obvious trap from the get-go. While trying to figure out what to do, Knuckles ends up running into Charming the Bee, Espio the Chameleon, Vector the Crocodile, of whom it's ambiguous as to if he and Knuckles still know each other, because in a story we skipped, they did end up knowing each other, but we don't know because he's too busy rapping because it's the 90s. Mighty Armadillo and the robot companions Heavy and Bomb, the latter two of which Knuckles has apprehension towards trusting. This apprehension is assuaged by revealing that Robotnik had built them too well to the point they became self-aware and ditched him, giving the heroes their cache of power gems to help with defeating the Doctor. Robotnik's gloating is interrupted by a declaration of war from Knuckles, to which Robotnik responds by sticking a recently upgraded Metal Sonic on them. The heroes quickly gain the upper hand until Metal Sonic abruptly powers up into Metal Sonic Kai, the Red Titan that served as the final boss of the Knuckles Chaotix video game, playable on your Sega 32X. Knuckles uses one of the power gems to grow to giant size and fight him on equal grounds. The fight takes a turn as Metal Sonic Kai crashes into the Hall of Mirrors, but despite what one might assume, this frees the Freedom Fighters instead, and Knuckles uses his newly restored physical strength to finish him off before the two shrink back to regular size. Robotnik flees on one of the rocket roller coasters, because comic books, and Renfield is left to be captured by our heroes and arrested by a cop that looks like a Muppet. Sonic suggested the group...
I noticed that too.
Sonic suggested the group form their own team, but they all vehemently refuse. Still, Sonic dubs them the Chaotix, and we wrap up the story with a group pose and a call to write in for more stories. We also have Tag You're It, misspelled your, where the Chaotix crew have a lighthearted gang of tag and get momentarily interrupted when Mespio stumbles into a mysterious stranger, but we're not covering that because we haven't gotten to the point where we're covering the Knuckles plotline yet, so blah 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 blah. We also get a story that is directly part of the plotline, which we're also skipping.
I like how that story resolves like, no way! And then immediately gets followed up by the rest of the Chaotix, Sans and Knuckles hanging out together, just, like, working together. Like, that, I don't know why they have that, like, I know why Knuckles at least would be against it, given, like, he's a loner. But, like, it's just weird to me that the rest of them are against the idea, you know, like, immediately it's disregarded and they work together as a team anyway and hang out together. I kinda like this story. I
didn't care for it
stuff.
myself.
What?
I wasn't too into it myself. I just thought it was kind of boring.
That's fair.
I just wasn't really interested in the general concept because it didn't really feel like much was going on with it, and I'm showing my bias again. Metal Sonic looks absolutely awful. For some reason, they gave him a mouth, and it looks absolutely awful. And then, like, when he transforms into his giant robot form, it just comes out of nowhere because it felt like, oh, right, this is meant to be a Chaotix adaptation. That's a thing that happens in Chaotix, right? And then they fight, and then it's just like, what?
I mean, to be fair, what can you really adapt from Knuckles Chaotix? Like, it's a very...
I know.
Like, I don't blame them for struggling with this, because there really is nothing much to that game. And, like, the whole Metal Sonic Kai thing just also comes out of nowhere in the game itself, too. Like, it's a weird thing. As cool as the design looks, like, it is kind of jarring in there, too, how he just suddenly turns into a big, freaky-looking monster metal. Oh, yeah, I was looking at the metal design in this. They give him a mouth and, like, actual eye, like...
Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, I don't like this design either. Like, it's more Sonic-like, but it also just looks off.
It just feels like other ones, like this Island Hedgehog, in which it just kind of feels like they're just going through the motions, being like, here's this thing from the game, and then this thing, and it's like, it ties into something I almost forgot to mention, is that at this point, Sonic just has Youngblood syndrome, in which they're constantly introducing new teams and groups of characters that we're expected to give a shit about. Because, like, we have the Arctic Mobians, the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters, the Down Under division of Freedom Fighters, and now the Chaotix. And, I mean, I like the Chaotix, but not because of this.
Fair. Like I said, I was at least fine with the first story. The second story is kind of there, I guess, to show off more of the Chaotix themselves, Sans, Knuckles. But, like, it's neat to see them together, and I sometimes just forget that Mighty was in this game as well, so I just associate him with Sega Sonic. But another weird little detail, for some reason they heavily redesigned both Bomb and Heavy. Like, and what seemed weird is, I didn't realize this because I didn't see this in, like, when I was reading through the last issue. We see the game designs of Bomb and Heavy in Robotnik's monitor, like, where he's, like, it's showing, like, all of the members of the Chaotix and the rat guy as, like, Robotnik sets up his plans. And it's like the normal design for those two, so I don't know why they changed him. Like, Heavy looks like like a completely different robot. Like, I'm not sure how to describe him. But Bomb is just like this little cartoon emoticon guy that does not speak, but he goes in ping and he blows himself up. But like Heavy says, like, oh, he can come back. Like, Bomb can do this and like can pull himself back together later. So I guess Bomb.
It just looks like it came out of like a Hanna-Barbera Pac-Man cartoon. Honestly,
like it looks kind of like the Orbinaut guys. Like, it looks like them, but with a mouth, which is just weird to me. I don't get it. It looks. I don't like these designs. So I just forget just how the Chaotix used to look. At least like the trio of Chaotix. Like, I'm kind of used to Espio's design. Like, I've seen it a few times, but it's also still weird. Because I'm just used to the more smoother, like, modern version. And Vector just looks off to me because I'm used to him being so top-heavy and buff. And Charmy's about the same age as he is in Chaotix and, like, a modern Sonic. He's just not... He doesn't repeat himself a lot as he does in, like, Heroes in Shadow, thankfully.
For now.
God, don't...
Yeah, but I just was not really that interested in the story, unfortunately. But we do go into another story. Unfortunately, another story that I'm not particularly fond of. Issue 31, A Robot Rides the Rails.
Oh yeah, this one.
Sally, despite Nicole's protesting, ends up hopping onto a moving train of Robotniks, one carrying a new super robot known as the Dynamac 3000. The rest of the Freedom Fighters hop onto a newly modified plane to follow after her. Sonic gets briefly stunned by a SWAT bot's laser, and Jeffrey St. John re-enters the story being a fucking creep by wrapping his hands around Sally from behind, faking out the reader into thinking it was a villain from the shadows, and then just continues to be gross by kissing Sally on the lips before even explaining why he's here. And as mentioned in the sonograms, he's now speaking with an Australian accent and using Australian slang. Sonic is able to catch up with the train right as the failsafe activates the Dynamac itself, and the crew need to work together to account for the mecha's strength and adaptability. There's a good amount of detail into, like, what its weaknesses are, what its strategies are, but we're already going to have a very long episode here, so forgive my brevity. The Freedom Fighters manage to take down the Dynamac, and while looting the train for supplies, Jeffrey once again kisses Sally in a panel I can only describe as uncanny, and the comic ends with some love triangle bullshit as Sonic clearly expresses jealousy about the situation. Don't like the story.
I don't like it either. I know there's like another Knuckles story that we can't really talk about yet. Do you want to bring up the Rotor?
No, let's just talk about this first. Let's just linger on this first. Yeah, this is the point where we're starting to have Pender's art start to crack, I feel, because otherwise it was fine. But now we're getting points where I feel like the characters are just frequently off-model, and the proportions keep changing on characters. Like, Sally just sometimes just starts looking more human-like, and as I alluded to earlier, there's a scene where the two of them are kissing, and they just look much more anthropomorphic and human in a way that even I, as a furry, find uncomfortable.
Right. Antron also looks a little weird. He's got, like, the regular, like, big, rounded eyes rather than his, like, tiny little beady ones, which is kind of jarring.
Also, I just did not want Jeffrey to return. I was, like, reasonably decent on him in the Sally miniseries, but that's because it was a self-contained story, and I didn't want to keep having him show up, and now he's showing up more, and I don't care.
Yeah, I've known about Jeffrey beforehand, and like this was why I was so nervous about him when we were going through the miniseries, because I just do not like love triangle bullshit, and I just find him to be annoying and kind of creepy. It's just how affectionate he is to Sally, especially since, like, the way it's drawn just looks weird. Like, it doesn't help that Jeffrey himself, like, kind of goes, like, frozen face sometimes. Like, he just looks like, it looks like a Disney cartoon character, like, older Disney. but like mixed it with an anthropomorphic design, so it just looks off. Like sometimes the art looks fine, other times it just looks kind of creepy because almost like they're humans in costumes, you know, like they're wearing a furry bodysuit and have mascot heads, and it just looks gross.
Especially with how they have more human, like, head shapes, with, like, the jaw lines. That's really a part that makes it so weird and uncomfortable looking.
I think I would like the story more if it just wasn't for Jeffrey, because, like, the rest of it, like, the fight's fine, and I like the action itself. I just don't like Jeffrey. Also, one thing I did want to note was, it's been brought up before, but, like, Nicole's had a bit more personality. Like, she's, at the start of the issue, like, you have some banter between her and Sally, with Nicole warding her, trying to get her to, like, not go with this risk, and, like, Sally ignoring her, like, and Nicole's getting annoyed with it. Like, I kind of like this portrayal of Nicole, of her actually, them remembering, oh yeah, Nicole is not just a computer, she's an AI with, like, that's developed sentience and is friends with Sally. So I kind of like this portrayal of Nicole and hope we see more of it in the future.
The next story, Tundra Road. Rodor is woken up by a cry for help from his mom via an old walkie-talkie she had given to him as a gift. He ends up using his bathysphere submersible from way back in the miniseries to make his way through yet another maze the reader is implored to follow, before ending up at the frozen North Sea, aka his hometown. Reminiscing over his mom and baby brother Skeeter, he realizes that everyone is under a trance and learns that this is Robotnik's doing, as he detonated a neuron bomb to begin his takeover of the frozen North Sea. Robotnik intended to melt the polar ice caps to flood the world, but due to budgetary reasons ended up deciding to build a gigantic freezer to freeze the world instead. Rodor is found out by the SWAT bots, and the story ends on this issue on a cliffhanger as he's knocked out and thrown into the ocean. But in issue 32, it picks up and Rodor is quickly saved by the Arctic Mobians from earlier in the episode. They team up and use a literal Trojan horse to destroy the SWAT bots, but are unable to undo the brainwashing on all of the others, and all of Rodor's family and the various other brainwashed Mobians are left stranded on an ice floe. The story ends with Rodor placing a tracking device on them, and the Arctic Mobians promise to keep watch on them as Rodor heads back for Knothole.
It's just kind of there.
I liked the redesign of the SWAT bots to have, like, ice cube heads, cute, because they reminded me of the robot maid from the Jetsons.
I was just thinking, like, those penguins from, I think it was, like, not Scarlet and Violet, Sword and Shield, like, the ice block guys. I forget their name. Yeah. Ice Cubes, that's it. Yeah.
Ice Cube, yeah.
I guess it's fine. It's a Rodor story, so I think we said in Sad AM, Rodor is just not that interesting of a character in either version. But at least, like, I don't know, like, it's an okay story. Like, it's sort of high stakes, but it's still Gallagher writing, so it's still pretty wacky. But also, just the way that it ends kind of caught me off guard, with it just leaving it open-ended with, like, I mean, he got them away from Robotnik, but they're still brainwashed and stuck on an ice floe. So, I guess we'll get back to them eventually. It's just so weird to just, like, no real, like, resolution.
Also, one thing in the Sonicgrams at this section that I was very confused about, but feel like I vaguely remember, is that for the Western release of Sonic CD, they called Amy Sally, apparently.
I did not know
that. I mean, let me just read this up. One person writes in asking about, like, the guide they have for Sonic CD, and it shows Amy but calls her Sally. And so they write in about their confusion, and the editor says, as Sonic, "Hi Melissa, my Sega CD game was originally created by Sega in Japan. In that game, the pink hedgehog was named Amy Rose. When the game was introduced in the US and Canada, Sega decided to call her Princess Sally. However, since she looked nothing like the Princess Sally we know and love from my comic and ABC TV show, the gang at Archie Comics decided they would avoid confusion by using her original name." Confusing,
weird.
Huh?
I guess it makes... it's a strategy guide. That kind of shit happens. to varying degrees. So, weird little bit of trivia to learn about.
And then we get into issue 32. Blast from the Past. Fleeing from SWATbots, Sonic stumbles into Mutsky, his roboticized pet dog. He ends up calming him down in a parallel to the SAT-AM pilot, but is unable to bring him back home as Uncle Chuck sends the SWATbots off using a remote control, saying that Mutsky still lacks his free will, and it would actually be very dangerous for Sonic to have him nearby. Anyway, the gang stumble into a caveman and a hijinks ensue as they thaw him out. After Bunny tries to communicate with the caveman through picture, the caveman leaves for the mountain range to try and find their family. Sonic saves him from the SWATbots that pursued, and the scuffle ends up restoring Mutsky's free will as Mutsky ended up slamming into a wall. Again, it ties into the point of, it feels like they just abruptly decided that Mutsky now, alongside Uncle Chuck, are just fine.
Kind of disappointing just how quickly and easily these things are resolved. Like, I know they're still kind of early enough and, like, they haven't fully transitioned into the drama, but I don't know, like, a bit more tension or something a bit more, like, it's just kind of a afterthought, like, oh yeah, he's saved, like, I like the story's fine. Like, it's a pretty typical, like, caveman and
cartoon tropes.
Story.
Yeah, just more cartoon tropes that I don't particularly care for.
I was kind of surprised that, like, the caveman actually wasn't an antagonist. Like, I was assuming, like, with the cover, we see, like, Mutsky, the SWATbots, and the caveman coming down on Sonic as, like, him and Sal are hanging from the ledge. I was assuming, like, it was going to be, like, one big confrontation on, like, the ice area, wherever this is, and with all these parties attacking. But no, it's just kind of a standard caveman in present day story.
I don't have much to say about this or the next issue, so we'll just wrap up this episode with issue 33.
Oh wait, no, this one, yeah.
Let's get small! All of the Freedom Fighters except Sonic is sick. Sonic uses the shrink ray from before to shrink him down to really small size to fight evil French germs called parasites and flaming fevers. The antibodies, depicted as literal antis, end up dealing with the fevers, and honestly, I don't want to talk about this story more than I have to. It's really gross, and it's just a really uninteresting plotline that, again, is more cartoon tropes again.
I won't go into too much detail, too, about this story, at least, but this was the point when I was just fed up with Gallagher's bullshit. I know this is a kid's comic. I know, like, I try not to be too harsh, but
kids deserve better.
Yes, that's what I said earlier. Like, kids deserve better than this crap. I ain't putting aside the gross stuff. Like, there's just so many lame gags, like the French virus, like the antibodies, as well as just, like, the fact that this happened because the Freedom Fighters were, like, needed something to eat, and, like, because apparently all they have in the fridge was just old chili dogs. For some reason, they decided to order from a fast food joint that appeared recently that was very clearly from Robotnik. It's just so fucking stupid. It's also where as I mentioned earlier, knowing that this guy used to work on Mad explains a lot, because, like, both the humor and the gross out stuff, especially from Michael Gallagher specifically, given, like, there's a certain comic from him from Mad that is very gross that felt reminiscent of this comic, this story. It explains a lot, like I said. I hate this story. I hate this story so fucking much, dude.
Also, the Sonic ends up going to microscopic size by powering the shrink ray into Rotor's computer, and then uses the grow function to go back to normal. And I honestly thought, given it was still shown to be plugged into his computer, we were just gonna have a joke where Sonic just grows too big. And I was like, that's gonna be pretty funny. But no, then it's just another joke about chili dogs. Because they make chicken soup, but it's made with chili dogs. And then we go into the final story of this episode, Sonic Shot. We're skipping another Knuckles subline. Another... We skip another
God damn it.
We skip yet another Knuckles plotline and move into the final story, Sonic Shot. The Freedom Fighters are playing ice hockey, and Snively joins in with SWAT bots in tow, wanting to take a break from having to be evil all the time. Though he promises no tricks, Robotnik decides to up the ante by wagering the winner-take-all bet, in which the Freedom Fighters win their freedom, and Robotnik in turn wins complete subordination. Snively, just wanting to have fun, is relieved that the Freedom Fighters end up winning this game. It's just a nice little fluff page filler, as Vespa put it. I do like, again, this more nuanced take of Snively that Penders is continuing to do, that he's just like, I don't want to have to deal with being evil all the time, I just want to play hockey.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. I just felt... I like the story, but it is kind of jarring going, like, again... Go from, like, Snively having no idea what to do without Robotnik to him getting fed up and wanting to steal his role of Big Bad to, I don't want to be a bad guy sometimes. Sometimes I just want to hang out and have some fun because Robotnik's a killjoy and band's fun.
It's just a problem with writing in comics in general, is that we have multiple writers. Characters are not always going to be written consistently.
Yeah, Paraphrase Sonic Lost Road, Snively's a complicated guy. I fucking hate Lost Words right so much. I fucking hate that line so much. It's just what I was thinking of in the back of my mind. Like, first you're trying to stop us, and now you're helping us. I'm a complicated guy. Fucking Lost Road.
God. And then the comic...
Anyway.
The comic wraps up with a preview for a new special titled Super Sonic vs. Hyper Knuckles, but we're gonna cover that in the next episode as we move into the Opinion Zone. Wait, that's the email... That's the song they use for the email section in Let's Fight a Boss. It's hard to say my opinion on this, because I feel like my opinions on this batch as a whole I can easily articulate, but putting it to just this section here that we're covering on this episode, I don't really know how to put it. I just think it sucks, though. Like I said that at the top, that it just feels like the story is just spinning its tires. Like, we've got some ideas of storylines going on, but we also just have a lot of fluff that's just not really that interesting. I was just getting a bit frustrated reading this. Also, they did my boy Metal dirty. Damn it, Gallagher.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the same boat as you. Like, besides some of the Tails stuff, they were just kind of a forgettable batch, and like, I didn't know much about these stories going in, so, like, when I saw the covers, I was thinking, like, oh shit, this is when things start to really pick up, but no, we're still just kind of in that transitory phase, and I feel disappointed for hyping everyone up, like, beforehand, like, oh man, this is when the comic starts to pick up the pace, and it kinda does, sometimes. Other times, we get issue 33.
Yeah.
Like, that story is just the benchmark of how bad these comics can get, I feel like. At least, like, how bad the early stuff can get. But, like, well, I don't hate this batch as much as I think you do. I can agree that it is a pretty dull batch of stories. Like, a lot of pretty typical, like, comic, or not so much comic, but like cartoon tropes you've seen a dozen times and we'll see a dozen more. Played out the way you kind of expect them to. A lot of lame gags. And it's not great. Most
of my hate for this, I don't even say hate, I think it's a strong word. Again, it's just a matter of I tend to speak very passionately, and it's easily like construed as me hating things way more than I actually do. I did also just think it's a dull batch, honestly, and my frustration is just like, I genuinely thought at the end of the previous episode that we're in the transitionary period of finally phasing this stuff out, And right here, I could be wrong again, given we haven't read ahead yet, but I'm pretty confident at this point, given what I've been spoiled on, that this is, like, the last bit of, like, episodic guff, and is, like, frustrating because of that, you know? It's just frustrating, because we get so many interesting covers, especially because at this point, Spazionte has basically fully taken over cover duty, and he does really good covers, but then it's just also a matter of a lot of them are very misleading because that's just how comics are, especially in this era.
Yeah, make them look much cooler to sell you on it. But man, yeah, I think also part of the issue too is like we get these pretty big status quo change up, like, oh, more freedom fighters are joining in. Oh, Knuckles is teaming up with Chaotix, and Uncle Chuck and Mutsky are joining the freedom fighters and have been reformed. But like it just feels like some of this stuff is just kind of an afterthought or isn't as interesting as you'd think. Like the freedom fighters are just kind of more nobodies, don't really have much outside of their design usually, and sometimes they're just kind of a one-note joke like Guru Emu.
Yeah. Like, I don't like using words that... I don't like assuming malice or incompetence in anyone, but a lot of this batch just felt half-hearted. Like, just plodding through plot beats from people who don't really care about Sonic. And I do need to qualify that with, I don't think that's how the writers felt with this. It's just what it feels like going through this.
I get that, especially with like the two, like with the adaptations, really, because like it kind of just feel like there's points like, okay, we gotta do like the mandatory advertise the game thing for the free specials, and then just go back to like our regular scheduled Sonic comic shenanigans. Because it just feels like there's like these jarring bits like, oh, here's the thing from the games, like we didn't bring it up during the Chaotix issue, but like they shove in stuff like the power-ups and the combiner ring during the Metal Sonic fight, but it's just like a very quick thing for like a panel or two before they move on. Like if the
it reminds me of when like Sonic just inexplicably gets his insta shield in this Iron Hedgehog. Where it's like bam, bam, bam. Like here's like this element from the game, and here's this like objects from the game, and it's just like, did you just play the game for like 5 minutes and go, here's this thing that we're gonna feature, and then this thing that we're gonna feature? Like, it's just not interesting to read.
I feel like it's probably just like a mandatory thing. Like, you gotta make sure you have this, this, and this in your special issue so we can sell the whatever game there was being adapted for it.
But with that, we move on to a new section, the rankings, the stage rankings. This is a new section where we're gonna highlight our favorite and least favorite issues of the comic, just because I thought it'd be neat to give its own section. For this batch, it's hard for me to say what my A rank, my favorite issue is. I would probably say issue 27 though, because I did really like that idea of what if Sonic got amnesia and was told by Robotnik that he's on his side, because I do like what if stories. Those are some of my favorite things, and again, the stakes in that were like actually pretty severe, given Sonic is a seasoned fighter at this point. He's very powerful, very fast, and so you sick him on the freedom fighters. That's very dangerous, you know? So I thought that was an interesting story, even if I did feel like it deflated itself with issue 28. In my head, I like the idea of, I don't know how it would be paced, would be like 27 has that going on, maybe even just like building up to it for the entire issue. 28 has like the main fight, and then 29 ends up having like Sally get roboticized, and then they gotta figure out how to deal with that and undo it. But like, whatever, it's wishful thinking. My D rank, because that's the lowest ranking in Sonic. E rank. Yeah. My E rank for least favorite issue would be, hands down, issue 25, tied up with issue 29 and second place, because, man, Metal Sonic deserved better. And also, like we mentioned, the page layouts are just almost unreadable at points for 25. And in 29, we went into a lot about how really annoying all the characters' decisions are, how it doesn't make any sense, and oh god, why is Dulcie here, you know?
Yeah. For my favorite issue, I'd say Sonic and Knuckles, honestly. Like, I know we said, like, for one thing, we didn't go over the second story because we gotta save that for later, and I know we said the Sonic and Knuckles, adaptation did feel like kind of a retread of this Island Echidna, or whatever it was called.
Hedgehog.
This Island Hedgehog, thank you. But honestly, I think what made this work for me is, it's the most we get to see of Knuckles. Like, it's because of my Knuckles bias. I fucking love Knuckles. He's been one of my favorite characters since I was a kid. I really think that, like, Penders surprisingly nails, for the most part, how he would be portrayed later on as, like, this gruff loner guy stuck on, like, the Angel floating island who has, like, kind of a rocky history with Sonic. But, like, he still, like, is a good guy. Like, he's very protective of his island, and he takes his role as the Guardian very seriously. Like, I very much appreciate how Penders handles him in this issue, and especially, like, how... I will get more into it when we talk about the Knuckles stuff later, but there's the way he's portrayed in the second story also shows, like, some of his flaws, like his, like, he can get very, like, riled up easily and, like, gets fooled, like he brings up, like, in the first story, he's fooled easily and doesn't like to be fooled, like, messed with. Like I said, it's surprisingly prophetic of how Knuckles would be handled in some later stuff, both, like, the good and the bad, and I kind of enjoyed that. As well as just, like, even if the last story was kind of, like, a simple kind of page filler thing, it was kind of neat seeing more of this interpretation of the floating island, where it's not just Knuckles and the little critters you save from the badniks. Like, there's, like, actual animals and things that happen on the floating island.
Even if the Knuckles dingoes look absolutely nightmarish and pasted in.
Yeah.
But go on.
Yeah, weird little thing, like when Knuckles and the Kangaroo Kid are getting back to the Kangaroo Kid's mom, they escape a pack of dingoes, but rather than, like, dingoes running all fours, it's like a group of, like, dingoes running in like a race or something for some reason.
Well, it's meant to be a stampede, but it just looks really awkwardly drawn in a way that's really funny.
But yeah, like I said, I love Knuckles, and I think this story did him surprisingly well. Unsurprisingly, least favorite issue is issue 33, with the runner-up being the Tails. I wrote down the Tails miniseries, but I think it's more the Tails story that leads into it that I fucking hated. 33, specifically the Let's Get Small story, again, gross out aside, I'm just tired of Fantastic Voyage stories in general. It's a played out concept in my mind. And it's just a lot of lame jokes that feel like something from the start of this. I genuinely believe that, like, even if you're a kid, you deserve better than, like, lame jokes about viruses and antibodies.
But that's gonna do it for this episode of Title Pendering. Tune in to the next episode where we wrap up this arc, go through an entire mini-series in which the word count of it is about the length of a previous episode of ours, and end up with the fall of Robotropolis. Stay pendering, Penderheads.
Gotta juice.